Welcome back to Super Recaps. In this video, I'll show you a horror thriller movie from 2022 called Fresh. Watch out for spoilers ahead. Our main protagonist, Noah, meets a guy called Chad on a dating app and decides to go on a date with him. She has a horrible first impression of him, as he even tells her to make sure she brings her own money, but she still tries to keep an open mind. Sadly, Chad is just as awful as she had predicted. Throughout their date, he only talks about himself, says sex is bullshit, and also subtly insults Noah for being dressed in simple clothes. When their date ends, he invites Noah for another date, but she declines. Chad is irritated by the refusal and starts insulting Noah. The next day, Noah goes to boxing class and confides in her best friend, Molly. She tells Molly about the disastrous date and expresses how she is lonely and single. Molly reminds her that she does not need a man to be happy. Even though the statement makes her feel better in the moment, Noah still proceeds to check her dating app once she gets home. Nonetheless, she does not find anyone interesting. Later, at the grocery store, she runs into Steve, who lamely tries to flirt with her by talking about grapes. Yet, when he asks for her phone number, Noah gives it to him. The following day, Noah tells Molly about the fortuitous interaction with Steve and says that she is attracted to him. Hearing Noah's positive comments about Steve, Molly teases her and says that Steve must be married. Yet, Noah is only concerned because Steve still hasn't contacted her. When she's going back home, she's happy to get a text from Steve, who invites her on a date at a pub. During the date, they learn more about each other, and Noah discovers that Steve is a plastic surgeon. They seem to get along, and the date goes smoothly. So, after the date, they end up sleeping with each other. Afterward, Noah contacts Molly the next day to tell her about her date with Steve. Molly becomes intrigued and intends to stalk Steve on the internet, but Noah informs her that Steve doesn't use social media at all. Molly points out how that is a red flag, but Noah likes Steve too much to take that comment seriously. Noah then says she recognized the bartender at the pub, and he was the guy Molly used to once hook up with. At night, Noah and Steve meet again at Noah's apartment. During dinner, Noah discovers that Steve does not eat animals. The night again goes so well, to the extent that Noah agrees without hesitation when Steve invites her on a spontaneous weekend trip. Later, she tells Molly about the weekend getaway, and Molly is incredibly concerned since Noah has no clue where Steve is even taking her. Nevertheless, Noah is desperately in love with Steve, so she doesn't question it. The next day, Steve picks her up for the weekend trip, and he informs her that they'll be staying at his house and that they will have to leave very early in the morning to avoid traffic. When they arrive at his house, Noah is instantly taken aback by its luxury, not even noticing that it is in the middle of nowhere. Then, Noah notes that there is no cell phone signal while walking around, and Steve assures her that his Wi-Fi must have died out. During their conversation, Steve hands her a cocktail he made, which she immediately drinks. Steve then continues to chat about the trip, but Noah begins to feel dizzy. Despite her efforts to combat the dizziness, she faints. Upon waking, she realizes she is in an isolated room with Steve sitting across from her. She asks what's going on, and Steve straight up tells her that he drugged her. Initially, she believes he's joking, but when she tries to get up, she notices that her hands are shackled to the floor. She begs Steve to remove the handcuffs, but he refuses. Steve tries to explain things to her, but Noah is too busy freaking out, so Steve gets annoyed and screams at her to pay attention. He reveals that he sells human meat and that he plans to sell hers as well, but he will keep her alive for a long time because he only supplies fresh meat. Once Steve leaves, Noah begins to shout for help, and she hears someone respond from the other room. She begins begging for help, but the girl from the other room says she can't help as they are both in the same situation. She then tells Noah that she has lost all sense of time because she has been here longer, and that Steve is slowly cutting away her parts and feeding them to his customers. Meanwhile, Molly is increasingly becoming concerned about Noah. Despite the fact that Steve has been responding to her texts via Noah's phone, she has become even more suspicious of their chats. When she can't discover anything about Steve online, she saves the photo that Steve sent via Noah's phone and reverses searches for it on Google. Molly finds the same image on Google, much to her distress, and realizes that the picture was not taken by Noah. Elsewhere, Steve brings food for Noah, but she refuses to eat. He tries his best to act kindly, but it does not affect Noah because of the situation. Then, Noah requests a shower, so Steve accompanies her to the bathroom. Noah, on the other hand, tries to run away as soon as they leave the room. This causes Steve to become enraged, and he knocks her down. Noah then awakens on an operating table, and Steve tells her that this is her punishment for disobeying. Noah then gets to witness Steve's full brutality as he cuts off her butt to sell it. In the meantime, Molly visits Paul, the bartender of the place where Noah and Steve had their first date. She requests information about Steve, but Paul can't reveal such sensitive information for the fear of being fired. Molly departs in hopes that Paul might reconsider. Meanwhile, Noah continues to talk to Penny about Steve. As victims, they are comforted by each other, and Noah admits to sleeping with Steve. Penny is shocked because no other victim had claimed to sleep with him. Later at night, Molly is working when Paul gives in to her request and sends her Steve's name. With his real name now, she quickly searches for him on Facebook and comes across Anne, Steve's wife, and it appears he is married with 2 children. Molly rushes immediately to their address the next day to search for Noah. She also texts her location to Paul in case something goes wrong. In the meantime, Steve has given Noah some magazines to read as entertainment while she is locked up. Steve visits her occasionally, but she ignores him entirely. However, Penny's statement was bothering her, so Noah questions Steve about why he slept with her. He confesses to liking her but tells her it was a mistake. After Steve is gone, Noah finds a little message in the magazine. It's an oath from a previous victim. Noah takes the suggestion and starts being nicer to Steve. She even inquires as to what human meat tastes like. Steve responds honestly, but is puzzled as to why Noah would even care. Regardless, he doesn't think much about it. Molly, meanwhile, approaches Steve's wife Anne about Noah's predicament. Even though they sit down to discuss it, Anne appears to be unconcerned with the matter. She doesn't think her husband will ever cheat on her. Steve then returns home and notices Molly, but he maintains his composure. Before leaving, Molly calls Noah's phone and discovers that it's actually with Steve. Her suspicions are now confirmed, and the couple has no option but to abduct her, so Anne strikes her unconscious from behind. Back to Noah, Steve approaches her and inquires as to why she was interested in the taste of human meat. Despite finding the sudden interest strange, Steve takes Noah to supper and even provides her with fresh clothes. At Steve's place, he informs Anne that he will be unavailable for the following night due to business obligation. He then praises Anne for being a good partner by eliminating Molly. Steve makes small talk with her about their children and leaves after kissing her goodbye. When Anne removes her clothes while showering, we see that she has a prosthetic leg. During dinner time, Steve prepares human meat for Noah. They spend some private time drinking wine, and she asks questions about Steve's past, wondering how he got into this business. Steve gives her a straightforward answer. He says he tried it once and became hooked on the flavor. Following that, he discovered others with the same taste, so he established a business and started supplying human meat to whoever paid for it. Afterward, Steve serves her meatball pasta as their main course. Ignoring the horror of where the meat came from, Noah pushes herself to eat it. Putting up an act for Steve, Noah doesn't seem disgusted as she eats. She even compliments the taste and claims it's indescribable. After dinner, Steve locks Noah back in her cell and walks to the cell where he has kept Molly. He takes her and performs surgery on her too. Elsewhere, Paul has begun to suspect that something is wrong and goes to the location Molly sent him. Back to Noah and Steve. It appears that Noah's scheme is succeeding because Steve returns the next night and gives her a beautiful dress and invites her to dinner again. And Noah agrees. He also gives her some makeup items before leaving so she may get ready. First, both of them freshen up and dress well. Then they have another romantic candlelit meal with human meat. Following that, Steve reveals a hidden shelf behind a picture. This is where he keeps all of his victims' belongings and documents. Noah even notices a photograph of Penny. Then, she realizes that her belongings are missing. When she's looking at the mobile phones, she spots Molly's phone. Despite being alarmed, she maintains her casual act. As they finish up with dinner, Noah begins to cry, saying she feels guilty because she doesn't feel bad about eating human meat. This makes Steve's defenses crumble, and he tries to console her right away. Despite kissing her, he does not fail to handcuff her after they finish eating. She then asks him to dance with her, and the mood is very romantic, so they decide to go to bed together. But first, Noah goes to the bathroom for a few moments. When she comes back, she pretends to go down on him but bites off his genital instead. He cries in agony, allowing Noah the chance to smear his eyes with toothpaste. She then steals his keys and uncuffs herself and locks him in the room. She then right away runs to Molly. She undies Molly, and then they also go to save a Penny. While Steve chases them, they try to escape while helping Penny as she is missing a leg. They surprise attack Steve in the kitchen, fighting as a group to defend themselves. Despite fighting against 3 people, Steve is fighting well. But when he tries to subdue Noah, Penny stabs him in the leg, and Molly kicks him in the face and finally knocks him down. Before they escape, Noah first gets all of their cell phones. Once outside, because of Penny's missing limb, the 3 have difficulty running. And so, Steve is behind them soon after, armed with a pistol. In addition, Paul has also just reached the location, but he has a bad feeling about this. And when he hears a gunshot, he immediately backs out of the driveway and runs away. and then enters the scene a little while later after struggling to contact Steve. She runs outside to search for Steve after discovering the bloody traces in the kitchen and hearing gunshots. Meanwhile, Steve searches for Noah and sees her hidden near the trees because her phone lit up. Molly witnesses this and rushes to shove Steve down in order to save Noah. They begin attacking him while he is on the ground, and finally, Noah kills him by shooting him with his own gun. They try to flee, barely evading Ann, who eventually finds Steve's corpse. But then, Noah leaves Penny with Molly and comes back to the woods to find her phone. Sadly, Ann notices her this time. She then claims to be one of Steve's victims, but Noah isn't buying it. However, Ann manages to knock her down and starts choking her. So Noah stabs her neck with the keys and tries to run away. Even after this, Ann remains upright. Fortunately, Molly shows up with a shovel to help Noah, and she continuously hits Ann's head with the shovel in anger. After getting rid of Ann, they rest against a tree, and Noah gets a text message from Chad, who is wondering if she's awake. Thanks for watching. To support the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button and press the bell icon to get new video updates.